That's what you learn to say when you use Morocco. All right. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Sallallahu wa sallam. على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. أما بعد, we are continuing our study of the work entitled شروط الصلاة وأركانها وواجباتها, the conditions of the prayer, its pillars, and its requirements. And in previous sitting, we have not only completed the conditions of the prayer, but we have now also entered into the pillars of the prayer. And the term rukn, it is the plural of the term arkan. The term pillar, it is, or stated that differently, the term rukn, it is the singular of the term arkan. And it is a pillar. And a pillar is the singular of the term pillars. And the meaning of a rukn, the meaning of a pillar is mahiyatu shay, the essence of a thing itself. And relative to our prayer, we are stating that these 14 items are from the essence of prayer itself. And if you no longer have the essence of a thing, then you no longer have that thing. So without these 14 items within our prayer, then we no longer have prayer, meaning we no longer have the validity of our prayer. So with the conditions of the prayer, the 9 conditions are 9 items that we do before we begin praying. And when we enter into the pillars of the prayer, we have now entered into a state of prayer. So these are the 14 things we do whilst we are praying. Now, in our previous sitting, we discussed the first 2 pillars of the prayer, al-qiyamu ma'a al-qudra wa takbiratul ihram. We discussed standing whilst having the ability to stand, and we have also discussed the opening takbir. We then were moving closer to the 3rd pillar of the prayer, and it is qira'at al-Fatihah, and it is the recitation of al-Fatihah. But before we get to that point, the author offers us 2 sunan of the prayer. 2 of the preferable acts of the prayer that add value, completion, they add blessing and reward to our prayer. But if we do not do them, they don't invalidate our prayer. Of course, we should continue to do them. We are looking at this through the lens of the mechanics of the prayer and how different items in the prayer function. So we looked at the dua al-istiftah, we looked at the opening supplication, we looked at the most common of the opening supplications that are said, and we also made mention of the fact that there are several opening supplications that the Prophet ﷺ would say, and as he would say several, he will alternate between them. We should also alternate between them as well, for in our altering the supplications and affirmations within our prayer, it assists us in keeping our prayer alive and keeping it from becoming something that is just purely mechanical or monotonous. It keeps us spiritually present with hudud al-qalb, with our hearts being present inside of the prayer. The author continues on to a 2nd sunnah of the prayer, and it is what we call isti'adha. It is what we call seeking refuge in Allah. And Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala, he has mentioned, فَإِذَا قَرَأْتَ الْقُرْآنَ فَاسْتَعِذْ بِاللَّهِ مِنَ الشَّيْطَانِ الرَّجِيمِ. And when you are reciting the Quran, then seek refuge in Allah from the accursed Satan. This particular verse that comes in Surah An-Nahl, we find that there is an order. Whenever you recite the Quran, meaning whenever you intend to recite the Quran, meaning before you recite the Quran, seek refuge in Allah from the accursed Satan. Fasta'idh billah. This is an order. And this order here, it is understood to be an order of nadab, not an order of wujub. It is understood to be an order of encouragement, not an order of obligation. We are encouraged to seek refuge in Allah from the accursed Satan before we get ready to recite the Quran, or before we begin reciting the Quran. Even though this is in order, and the origin within order is obligation, the majority of scholarship will say that this is encouraged by evidence that if you don't say it, it doesn't invalidate your prayer. So because it does not invalidate your prayer, it cannot be an obligation to say this. So in any regard, what is actually said? Well, we say, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. I seek refuge in Allah from the accursed Satan. There are also other variations of this that the Prophet ﷺ would say as well. Not only this, there are others that are stated that are lengthier than this. And we should take the time to learn those and say those at times as well. But the point here, what is the meaning? A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. I seek refuge in Allah from the accursed Satan. The author provides meaning for us. And he states, Ma'na a'udhu, the meaning of a'udhu, the meaning of I seek refuge is aludhu wa al-taji'u wa a'tasimu bika ya Allah min ash-shaytanir rajim al-matrud al-mub'ad an rahmatillah la yudurruni fi dini wa la fi dunyaya. Okay. So the meaning of this is I seek refuge, I seek shelter, I seek protection in you, O Allah. This is the meaning of a'udhu. I seek refuge, I seek shelter, I seek protection in you, O Allah. This is the meaning here. From the shaitan that is al-rajim, from Satan who is al-rajim. Al-rajim, this means cursed. This means cursed. But what does it mean to be cursed by Allah? Because that is what we are saying. We are stating when we say that we seek refuge in Allah from the accursed Satan, he's accursed by who? He is cursed by Allah. So then the curse means what? The curse means to be devoid of and distanced from the mercy of Allah. This is what it means to be cursed by Allah. We always need the mercy of Allah. We ask Allah that He bestows His mercy upon us throughout this life, into the hereafter, in our graves, on the day of resurrection, into paradise. But to be devoid of that mercy and then to be distanced away from that, this is what it means to be cursed by Allah, tabarak wa ta'ala, as Satan is. Further, when we are seeking refuge in Allah from the accursed Satan, the meaning further is that he cannot, or rather, he does not harm me, neither in my deen nor in my dunya. He does not harm me in my religious life, nor in my worldly life. And this is really the reality, because the only thing that Satan and his army can actually do real time is whisper, is suggest. The power still rests with the individual in making the choice to do or not do in that particular scenario. And the more the iman of the servant increases, the stronger the faith of the person increases, the more the individual explores, the more the individual enacts Tawheed, enacts Sunnah, enacts monotheism, enacts prophetic tradition, the weaker Satan is toward that individual and the more distant Satan is from that individual, right? So go ahead.
So we can't blame the shaitan anymore for anything.
Look, in reality, no. People say that, you know, shaitan made me do it. Not really.
It's the nafs.
It's the nafs, right? It's the nafs agreeing with shaitan. Yes, he suggests, yes, he's doing the deeds that he does, but in reality, the person makes the choice. And again, the stronger that we are, the further away he is anyway, which places even more so on the self. Does that make sense? The more we're upon the remembrance of Allah Ta'ala and frequenting with that, the more that we are with the Quran and with His recitation, right? The more that we're making the supplication for the morning and the evening, right? The more that we utilize, well, in this modern time, we'll say the more that we utilize these dua books that we have, right? Hisnul Muslim, Fortress of the Muslim, you're saying these du'as throughout your day and your night, more angels around you and more devils are further away from you, right? Of course, they're going to make their attempts, but in reality, that makes sense? Tight. The author continues and he states, وَقِرَاءَةُ الْفَاتِحَةِ رُكْنٌ فِي كُلِّ رَكْعَةٍ. And the recitation of al-Fatiha is a pillar in every rak'ah, in every unit of prayer. كما في الحديث لا صلاة لمن لم يقرأ بفاتحة الكتاب. As has come in the hadith, there is no prayer for the one who does not recite the opening of the book. And he states, وَهِيَ Quran, and it is the mother of the Quran. Interestingly, this opens up a discussion. The first discussion is reciting al-Fatiha a pillar of the prayer or not? Meaning, if you do not recite al-Fatiha in your prayer, is your prayer still valid or not? Okay. The first item of discussion here is concerning the individual who either does not know or doesn't have the ability to recite al-Fatiha. This person won't be reciting al-Fatiha. Like, for example, the new Muslim, let's say, or perhaps the individual that the Arabic language is that large of a barrier for them that they're not able to recite it in the Arabic language. Okay. So for these people, for this genre of person, is their prayer invalid? The author is saying it's a pillar of the prayer, meaning no Fatiha, no Salah. The Prophet said in the hadith, there is no prayer for the one who does not recite the opening of the book. So what do we do? Go ahead.
Even if they recite it in the English, I'm just thinking, like, how is it that, because this is just not, especially here, we're just not Arabic speaking people, we had to learn it.
Right.
So do we take Shahada and just don't pray because we don't know it, or we wait to pray until we learn it? So to me,
so you got to do something, huh?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, Diego?
It was similar to like Muhammad and Khas. There's just like a general and then it's specific.
Correct.
It's general.
Right.
But then there's some exceptions.
Right.
Meaning, like if you're a new Muslim or more. But if you have the ability to, then absolutely it's okay.
Okay, good. All right, so let's follow this through. So, firstly, for an individual who doesn't have the ability to recite al-Fatiha, perhaps a new Muslim, we have a hadith that comes in the Sunan of Abi Dawud. And what it mentions is, for such an individual, this person should say, Subhanallah, walhamdulillah, wa la ilaha illallah, wallahu akbar, for every position of the prayer, until that person is able to learn what to properly say in every position of the prayer. So that's the sunnah in this scenario. Now, scholarship discusses individuals who don't have the ability to express these items in the Arabic language. There are those among scholarship that will make an allowance for these individuals in this scenario, and then say it is allowable for them to do so in their mother tongue, right? To say their prayer in their mother tongue. Not because it's allowable to say your prayer in your mother tongue, but because they don't have the ability to say it in its proper language. Does that make sense? So then once they gain that ability, well, then they no longer have that allowance anymore, okay? Take another step here. When we say that the prayer is not valid without reciting al-Fatiha, this is what the majority of scholarship will say. that al-Fatiha is a pillar of the prayer. No Fatiha, no Salah. We do have, though, scholarship from the Ahnaf who will hold the opinion that it's not al-Fatiha specifically, but it can be anything from the Quran so long as the Quran is recited, be it al-Fatiha or other than it, that it suffices that pillar. You're going to say evidence premised upon what? They will say based on the verse in the Quran, اقرأوا ما تيسر معك من القرآن, where Allah orders, read whatever is facilitated for you of the Quran, meaning the entire Quran, right? So then they will say based on this verse, if you anything you recite of the Quran in this position in Qiyam suffices that pillar. They hold a minority view in that regard. The majority will say that you have to actually recite al-Fatiha. What level, to what degree do you have to recite al-Fatiha? Because people are of varying levels in their recitation of al-Fatiha. So as long as you're saying anything that is al-Fatiha, it suffices?
I think if you were trained, once you learn it, it's on you.
Once you learn it, you have to say it and say it properly, you're saying.
If you learn that it's if you learn the correct way and you're trained, you sit with someone, you go back and they correct you, then it's on you to say it the correct way. You're not allowed to make those mistakes. But if you're not, you can't. Then.
Okay. All right. So when we are, well, we have to enter into this briefly. So we have something that we've all heard of before called tajweed, right? Okay. Elocution is the English word for it. But tajweed is, we're going to say reciting the Quran properly, right? So tajweed from the root word jayyid, for something to be good, right? To make something hasan, to make or to beautify a thing, right? So the understanding is not just that the words of the Quran were revealed to the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and that's what he's conveyed to us, but how those words are stated was also conveyed to the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam by Jibreel from Allah. So we're not just learning the words of the Quran. We are, when we recite with proper tajweed, we are seeking to recite the Quran the way that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam recited the Quran, the way that Jibreel recited the Quran to him, the way that Allah revealed it to Jibreel. That's what we're seeking to do with tajweed, right? All of that so that we can say the proper word, so that we're saying the right word the right way. That's what we're doing with tajweed. And once we're saying the right word the right way, now we know what word we're talking about. Now we can look into the meanings of that word, because we're not talking about any other word, right? All of that is to get, all that tajweed is to get us to this point. We're saying it right and we have the right word. So now we're looking into the meaning of this right word. So once we have the meaning of that right word, we then take the admonition from that right word, and then we seek to act in accordance with that right word, right? But tajweed is kind of the threshold, but the goal is to get to action. Does that make sense? All right. Now, when we falter in this line of saying it the right way, then that's called a lahan, right? That's called an error. That's a lapse, right, of the tongue. There are two types of lapses. There is lahan al-sughra and lahan al-kubra. There is a light error and there is a not so light error, right? So there's a minor error and there's a major error. With a light error, this means that you are not reciting it correctly, and generally, but we're talking about al-Fatiha specifically because this is the pillar, right? So you're not reciting al-Fatiha correctly. However, in your error, in your lapse, you have not changed the meaning of the Quran, right? So sometimes you might mispronounce a letter. Sometimes you might mispronounce some diacritical marking, or vowel marking, or whatever it is, a shadda, but it doesn't change the meaning of it. That is something that can be overlooked. If we enter to the realm of al-lahan al-kubra, if we enter to the realm of a major error or a major lapse, this means that you have now changed the meaning of the word. You are now no longer saying what Allah said. Okay? Once we get into this realm, this is now when we're redlining, right? And if we know that we've made an error and we don't correct it, it's a problem. If we know that we made an error, we don't correct it, and we have the ability to correct it, it's an even bigger problem, right? Now, in this area, this can invalidate your salah, minimally that rak'ah, minimally that unit of prayer. The saving grace for the majority of the Muslim world is the fact that most of us that are making errors, we're making errors because either we don't know or we don't have the ability to be that precise in our recitation. Does that make sense? So because of that, it's overlooked. And we're speaking to this realm of tajweed and recitation. There is, imagine a circle, right? Let's call it da'irat as-sawab. It is the circle of accuracy, right? You can think about it like a, goodness, what is the word for it? It's a game that we play here, right? What do you call it with the pins? You throw it at the wall. What's that called? Darts, right? The dartboard. Okay, so you have a dartboard, right? Anything inside the dartboard, technically you've hit the target, right? If you're outside the dartboard and you're on the wall, you just totally missed. Tajweed is like that, right? So imagine a dartboard and there are points. Anything in it, you're right, you get points, but the closer you get to the center, the more accurate you are, right? Nothing in there is wrong, but there are things in there that are more right. Recitation is like that, right? When we're saying al-lahan al-kubra, a major error, you're not even on the dartboard, you're off in the wall somewhere, right, with your aim, right? Okay. So again, if we are aware that we are reciting al-Fatihah incorrectly in a way that is changing the meanings of Allah's speech, and we have the ability to recite it correctly, and we choose not to, that invalidates your prayer, minimally that rak'ah. That unit of prayer would have to be made up, right? But again, the majority of the Muslims are either so detached from proper tajweed or otherwise just don't have the ability to recite with that level of precision that is overlooked anyway, right? Believe it or not, Sheikh Muhammad Musa Nasr, may Allah have mercy upon his soul, he has an entire book just on this specific issue. Because in his traveling through the world, there were so many people that were making errors in al-Fatihah that had no idea in what errors they were making, that he decided to write a book on it just to raise consciousness about the issue. It's not just an easy thing, right? Because it's something that threatens the validity of your prayer, right? And I believe we made mention when we were with Sheikh Khalid al-Ghamidi, may Allah preserve him, some years ago in Mecca, and he was going over al-Fatihah with us, and he wanted to impress this type of a point, and he picked up on some individuals that were stating iyaka instead of iyaka, shadda on the ya, right? Reciting without that shadda, it changes from, right, iyaka na'budu wa iyaka nasta'in, it changes from you alone do worship and you alone do we seek aid to we worship the sun and we seek aid in the sun. Just a shadda, right? So he mentioned that just to impress his point that we need to, if nothing else with the Fatiha, we need to be, right, precise. For benefit, on another occasion, we were with Sheikh Ali al-Hudayfi, may Allah preserve him, the famous Quran reciter. I think some of us are familiar. Imam in the Prophet's Masjid, famous khatib as well, scholar in fiqh. So we were with him, and on that occasion when we were with him, there were probably over 100 people who were present, right? And he just came to give a lecture. Right? He came to give a lecture. We were there to benefit from him. Fine. He made a point to mention al-Fatihah. He wanted everyone to recite al-Fatihah to him, right? man and woman. And if he finished his lecture around 9:30, 10, we were there until about 1 o'clock, 1:30 in the morning, until he heard everyone's Fatihah and offered advice about their Fatihah, right? Because of this issue that we're talking about right now. Zach, you have a question?
So if the person, I was in the prayer, they recited al-Fatihah perfectly. But when they're reading another surah, they said all the Muslims will go to, instead of Jannah, it was Jahannam. So after the prayer, then they corrected him because I don't know, he was too fast when he went to Ruku. After the prayer, there was an argument that happened.
Okay.
Should we repeat it? Should we not repeat the prayer? That was a big argument. And the majority repeated the prayer. The others argued and they left. So would you then, if it's a big mistake like that, would you have to repeat the prayer?
So okay, good. So all right, so let's speak about it mechanically. So if we're saying this, now we are reciting other than al-Fatihah.
Right, besides the prayer.
To recite other than al-Fatihah is from the sunnah of the salah, not from the pillars or the requirements. So it's not something that would threaten the invalidity of the prayer, but what that does do, this is the point where someone is meant to now correct the reciter, right? That's when the correction comes. Okay. To assist the one leading the prayer, that's how that goes. And since we're speaking about this, we're far from this, but we should mention it because we're in this realm of speaking about the salah, right? We know most of us in this country don't have this type of a setup or ability to do. But this is how the ranks are supposed to be set up. You do have the imam that's leading the salah, right? Then there is a mu'adhin. There's a person that's calling the adhan. The person that's calling the adhan is the assistant imam. That is meant to be the person to cover the salah when the imam is not present, or if the imam has some type of lapse in his recitation, the mu'adhin is supposed to be there to catch that lapse. So the mu'adhin is supposed to be on level. It's not supposed to be just anyone at random. We do that in America because we ain't got nobody else, right? But that's not the way it's supposed to be, right? And in the first ranks, it's supposed to be the most knowledgeable in the community. And if there is a person of scholarship who is also leading the prayer, then the disciples of knowledge are meant to be in the first ranks, right? So in the event that that person of knowledge or scholarship has a lapse, then the disciples of knowledge and other scholars are there to catch it. That's the way that it's supposed to be, right? But in this scenario, what should have happened was that person should have been corrected in his recitation because he was going too fast.
Well, I think he went to Ruku after. Something like because everybody there in the first row, they knew it, but they couldn't say it because I think it was, I don't remember exactly.
Sound like a kid might have been reciting.
Huh?
Sound like a kid might have been reciting.
A younger guy, and I put him there because his recitation is beautiful.
MashaAllah.
Beautiful. He'll become the Hafiz of the Quran. He's studying, but he got nervous. He made a mistake, and I think then he went to Ruku, and then they couldn't. Everybody knew he made a mistake, but they couldn't correct him. They couldn't catch him.
That's something that we could. You discuss it afterward, and you just move on. You keep praying, right? But now this is something added because this is something that's typical. That's why I said more than likely was somebody that was younger, right? But the way that we have chosen to do this, and historically throughout our heritage, we encourage our youth in training them to lead the prayer when it comes to larger prayers like Taraweeh and Ramadan. It's a training ground for our youth that are coming up. So it's training. You don't expect it to be perfect because it's training, right? So if we're going to choose to not place the most seasoned of us in front, then you are accepting what's going to come out of that, right? So that should have been no harm, no foul. That should have been, that's what that should have been. But alhamdulillah. Next issue. This is a fiqh point. Reciting al-Fatihah in an audible prayer for the congregation. If we're saying that al-Fatihah is a pillar of the prayer let's say Maghrib, although Maghrib, Isha, Fajr, but let's say Maghrib. The Imam is reciting al-Fatihah. What do the congregants do? If we're saying there is no prayer for the one who does not recite the opening of the book, what do the congregants do when the Imam is reciting al-Fatihah out loud?
Depends if you're Hanafi or not.
Or. What do the sisters say? Okay, how are you following the Imam? Go ahead.
So I think one scenario, maybe you can recite it along with them. And I think another school, they recite it after them.
Okay, good. Amina says?
I don't know. I mean, I just think, like, I just it was out of myself without being heard. Go along.
Go along. You recite with him or you listen?
Sometimes I just.
Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't.
Yeah.
What you've been doing the last 30 years. Huh?
I've been not back and forth, but I've been on both sides. I've switched my position.
Okay.
So now I say it.
Now you do say it.
Yes.
Okay. When do you say it?
Now I say it if I know the Imam and I know that he leaves a space afterwards, then I'll say it afterwards.
Okay.
And I'll wait. If not, then I'll go in at the pauses between the ayat.
Okay. All right. So yes, ma'am.
So I from my understanding as well, like when you lead the salat, the person is leading the prayer, it's like they lead the prayer for us.
Correct.
Okay, so I don't know.
إنما جعل الإمام ليتم به. The Imam has only been placed there so that he is followed. Right? And the meaning of that hadith is that he's followed in the pillars of the prayer. Right? Okay. So just to summarize this before we get too deep into the weeds, there are three views on this issue. No particular order. View number one is that the congregant does not recite al-Fatihah. Does not recite al-Fatihah because the recitation of the Imam is sufficient for the recitation of the congregation. Alaykum salam wa rahmatullah, like what Sister Amina is saying. View number two is that the congregant does recite al-Fatihah. Does recite al-Fatihah because there is no prayer for the one who does not recite the opening of the book. View number two. View number three is ihtiyat, al-khuruj min al-khilaf. View number three is to take the safer view and to escape the difference of opinion. And to combine between listening to the Imam and reciting al-Fatihah. So this third view means that you listen to the recitation of the Imam when he's reciting. You don't compete with him in his recitation, right? Because the Prophet ﷺ prohibited that. And then when he is not reciting, you recite al-Fatihah. That's the third view. There are two ways to do this, to practice this third view. One way is once the Imam has recited al-Fatihah, and then everyone has made ta'meen, everyone has said ameen, typically there may be a gap whilst the Imam is deciding what he's going to recite of the Quran after that. In this window, the congregant recites al-Fatihah to the extent that he or she is able, and it is not on the servant anymore if the servant is not able to complete. Because once the Imam makes takbir, goes into the next position, you have to follow the Imam in the pillars of the prayer. In the majur al-Imam liyutimma bihi. The Imam is only in places so that he is followed. So the congregation has to follow him at that point. Okay. However, it is not lawful for the Imam to purposefully hold that gap so that the congregation can recite it. That's way number one. Way number two, so let's call this 3A, 3B. Go ahead. Okay. It is not lawful for the Imam, after having recited al-Fatihah, to purposefully pause to give the congregation time to recite al-Fatihah before he recites another chapter of the Quran. That's not lawful. But the congregation can utilize the gap that the imam has while he is thinking about whatever he's going to recite. Okay? So that's 3A. 3B is when the imam is reciting, you listen to the imam and you recite after him. So he says, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. You say, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. Malik Yawmiddin, Malik Yawmiddin. As such.
Moving your lips or not moving your lips?
You have to move your lips. Right? All right, that's a separate issue. All right, we can come back to that. Okay, so in this way, it becomes almost the same way that a Quran teacher may be teaching children how to recite the Quran, where the imam recites and then the children repeat after him, right? That type of a thing. So these are the three views on this particular issue. Yes.
The three views, are they from different schools?
You'll find these differences throughout the school. So what I mean to say is, within each school, you'll find discussion about it, right? Because of how the ahadith are. So you have this hadith, right? La salata liman lam yaqra bi fatihatil kitab. There is no prayer for the one who does not recite the opening of the book, and that's just left open like that. So there's nothing to restrict it, right? In this particular hadith, we'll find other hadith like this one. لعلكم تقرؤون خلف الإمام والإمام يقرأ. The Prophet ﷺ stated to the Sahaba, perhaps you all are reciting behind the Imam whilst the Imam is reciting, right? And لعل is harfu taraji wal isfaq. You can say perhaps with hoping good for the person, like when you say كيف حالك? How are you doing? لعلك بخير. Hopefully you're doing well, right? So there's a positive hope there. But you can also utilize لعل with ishfaq, with a dismay, right? You said, perhaps were you all reciting behind me when I was reciting? So that's not an encouragement. That is a discouragement, as is here. So then they said, certainly, inna lanaf'al. Yes, that's what we were doing. And he says, فَلَا تَفْعَلُوا. Do not do that. Meaning don't recite while the imam is reciting. Right? Okay. إِلَّا إِنْ يَقْرَأَ أَحَدَكُمْ بِأُمِّ الْكِتَابِ. Except that one of you is reciting the opening of the book. Okay, Fatiha. Al-Qaw, or he stated Fatihatul Kitab, or he said the opening of the book. This hadith comes in the Musnad of Ahmed. Now, scholarship differs not on this hadith, but on the portion of the hadith that says except. From except forward, scholarship differs on the authenticity of that part of the hadith. So those who accept it, they're going to have to say that you have to recite al-Fatihah. Those who do not accept this portion, then it means you don't compete with the imam in his recitation at all. You listen attentively, right? Okay, so we can understand kind of where the differences are coming from and how the opinions are settling. We have the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. We just made mention of this. من كان له إمام فقراءته قراءة له. Whoever has an imam, then his recitation is his recitation. Meaning the recitation of the imam suffices for the recitation of the congregant. We also have the other hadith that states here, إِذَا قَرَأَ فَأَنْسِتُوا. When he recites, then you all listen attentively. Right? So all this would mean, okay, don't recite al-Fatihah because he's reciting al-Fatihah. So depending on how you understand these evidences and where you fall will determine what you do. But again, the views are three. One, and this is in the specific scenario where there's an audible prayer like Maghrib, Isha, Fajr, and the imam is reciting out loud. For the congregant behind the imam in that scenario, does the congregant recite al-Fatihah or not? Three views. No, he does not. He listens attentively. Yes, she does. Combine between both. Those are the three views. Yes.
According to the hadith, all are.
Technically, right? Because so here's the issue. So what we're seeking to determine is what did the problem. We're not necessarily, except for this one narration, the end of the wording where he says, except for if one of you recite to open the book, excluding that from the discussion. What we are attempting to determine is not what the Prophet ﷺ said. We know what he said. It's what did he mean by what he said? What's the context in what he said it? So did he say this meaning of Fatiha or excluding of Fatiha? We don't know. So we have to do the best job that we're able to. And step one is now to make tawfiq, to reconcile between these texts. And in our seeking to reconcile, we're coming up with different conclusions, right? Which is allowable and is encouraged for us to do. So then we understand that when we're going through these academics, the goal isn't necessarily to have the right conclusion per se. The goal is to utilize the correct methodology to reach the best conclusion on your own, right? That's what's upon us as Muslims in these types of issues, for those that have the ability to delve into them. What the truth actually is or is not, we're not going to know until we meet Allah and His Messenger. May Allah grant it to us, right? So because of that, it leaves it open for us in this life, knowing that possibly one of us must be wrong, possibly, but maybe not, right? Because we have the scenario where the Prophet ﷺ told the Sahaba to not pray Asr until you reach this location, right? And then Maghrib starts approaching. What do? Some of them stopped and prayed. The Prophet ﷺ didn't mean for us to miss Asr. He just meant for us to pray while we're going in this direction. Others said they held to the letter, not the spirit. The Prophet ﷺ said, don't pray until we get there. We're going to do what he said. Okay. The Prophet ﷺ, right? They all meet with him later on. So, all right, both of you are right. Okay. Now that we've said all that.
So we can say basically that there are allowable differences in certain.
Yes. So a hadith like this scenario, and I want to say it's the hadith comes in Bukhari and Muslim. I want to say it was, please fact check me. I want to say it was Khaybar. We said don't pray Asr until you reach Khaybar. It may have been a different locale, but I believe it was Khaybar. Allah knows best. In any regard, these ahadith like this are the evidence for the allowability of ijtihad in Islam for those who qualify to perform it. Right? These are the evidences for scholarly reasons. Now, hadith like this. 1, 2, this is the Prophet ﷺ training the Sahaba how to perform ijtihad so that they can use it after he's gone. Right? So there are several examples like this that occurred. Right? So ijtihad is a function of law. So it has to be allowable and pleasing to Allah. Yes.
This is common. That hadith changed my life.
Really?
How to perform Islam.
Really?
It was very strict.
Mm-hmm.
And when I heard the hadith in the talk translation about it, and then it opened up my mind.
SubhanAllah.
That way, you do the best you can to interpret it and what you think it is, what scholarship does it, and then go with that.
Mm-hmm.
Say Bismillah, and then it's fine.
Mm-hmm.
That's Qurayza's place.
It was Beni Qurayza. Beni Qurayza. Okay, طيب. Barakallahu feek. Now, we'll take a pause now. And or is Beni Qurayza in Khaybar?
I think it was it may have been the Ahzab of Khaybar. I don't know, but he said not until they reached Beni Qurayza.
We'll pause here, inshallah. We have discussed al-Fatihah as a pillar of the prayer, but what the author does, because of the importance of the Al-Fatihah that we've been stressing, what the author chooses to do is to offer a tafsir of Al-Fatihah, to offer an exegesis of Al-Fatihah. And honestly, for one who this is his or her first opportunity to academically be involved with the tafsir of al-Fatihah, this can serve as a foundation, right? This can literally be memorized as a tafsir of al-Fatihah that will aid you in your understanding of it, and you can build your understanding of the tafsir of al-Fatihah off of this if you so choose to. But the majority of what the author has stated really should suffice us. So most of what we'll be doing is reading through it. Perhaps we will add some annotations here and there, but the majority of what he states will suffice us for our effort. We'll come back in 10 minutes, inshallah. I had 12:13. We come back at 12:23 or before. Yes.
Is your humbly brain going to give us your opinion on this? Or what the mother view is on this, or what the...
Well, the Hamidi madhab is recited.
Recited with or after, or...
Either way. The Hamidi view is recited regardless of the Imam reciting it. His reciting it does not suffice your reciting it.
So, can we recite at the same time, Imam?
Yes. Mm-hmm. And now that we're on break, we had a very long and in-depth discussion one of the weeks that we were off camera. That might have been a week that either we had a lot of questions or we had the storm, and we had a very in-depth discussion about so many different issues. We discussed circumcision for men and women in detail. We discussed istinja in detail, istijmar, how to actually perform it properly, all of those things. And somewhere along the line, our brother Zahid gave the suggestion of dude wipes, right? So at one point, a question had arisen, not just about water and tissue, but about flushable wipes, right? About flushable wipes. So one of our sisters presented that question. Somewhere in there, we got into Zahid's mind. He knew about something called dude wipes. So he saw fit to actually purchase them and to bring them to class.
So you can use it and give us a review.
So I can use it and offer a review of the dude wipes. And the directions are: grab one and wipe dude. Right? Actually, the directions on the package. But may Allah reward your kindly, huh? So they are a real thing, huh? Zahid didn't make it up. Barakallah.
More expensive than normal ones.
Probably, yeah.
Probably.
Yeah, this was like $3 for, I think it was, how much in the 50?
I don't know. Little
Yeah, so
48.
48.
Yep. Mashallah. Yes, please.
What I have noticed in my years of being a Muslim and my traveling, different imams do different things. You have one imam who will pause after the Fatihah and let the congregation say the Fatihah, and then you have another imam. As soon as he finished,
he goes in
the next prayer. So
there's some room for that. There's some room.
Isn't there a hadith that said to pause after we say the Fatihah? If I'm not mistaken. I read that a long time ago.
There's a pause before the Ameen. There's a pause before Ameen, not after Ameen.
Oh. Then also the Ameen, that's another issue.
Go ahead.
Recite the Ameen.
Whether it's said out loud or not, does the congregation say it? Does the imam say it? Does everyone say it?
It has to be said. The question is it out loud or not? So I was talking to, I was asking a Hanafi scholar, and he was like, we say Ameen. You have to say Ameen. Because of the hadith that says you have to say Ameen, the angels say Ameen.
Who would want to exempt themselves from that?
Right. So
right?
You have
forgiveness
to say
from
Ameen,
Allah.
But the question is, you say it out loud or not out loud? And my conclusion was, if the imam is saying it out loud, you say it out loud. If he doesn't say it out loud, you don't say it out loud.
So my question is really the same. So the hadith mentions that, and we all know the hadith, that when we say Ameen, and the Ameen aligns with the Ameen of the Malaika, everyone achieves forgiveness. Who want to opt out of that? Right? We have an opportunity in every salah to be forgiven. Right? As much as we're praying, we hope that some of those line up with the Malaika. Right? Allahumma musta'an.
With the Abi, I hear some people trying to say it like really short Abi,
Mm.
and then you say it go home.
Mhm.
And sometimes when the email is like trying to say it's short, I'm thinking he wants everybody to say it short or say it go home.
Well, that is well, that's a question of tajweed, right? Are we reciting with tajweed or not, right? If we're reciting with tajweed, then you're going to hold the front part of Ameen with the count of 4 at least, right? Or up to 4, right? 2 to 4, right? 2 to 4 count, for example. So tajweed, no tajweed, right? It's actually not Quran and recitation of the Quran. So do we have to recite it with tajweed? You don't have to recite it with tajweed. But if you do, is that wrong? No, that's not wrong either.
And now what we're learning here is from the school of Hambali or Hanafi.
This text is a Hanbali text, but we're not necessarily limiting ourselves to the Hanbali madhab as we explain it.
As
Diego, go like this.
and transposing
Mm.
the ta and the ta, would that change the meaning of if they were to say
Well, go like this. You got it, I think. I don't know Sarata to be a word. You didn't get it. You didn't.
I didn't get it.
No. This might be you got sparkles, Aqil.
There's some glitter got all over my house.
It's in there.
It's the nude.
All right. So all right. Repeat your question again.
We're transposing the tall and the
Okay,
tab.
good. So me personally, I do not know Sarata to be a word. If it is not a word, then it can't change the meaning. Right? So it will be an error. You see it? It will be an error that does not change the meaning. So it will be a minor error. In Allah's best. Suratul Ladina. It's a common error that we make, right? In reciting the Quran. Instead of saying a ta, we say it like a ta. Right? Because we don't have a ta in English, we have a T. So we just automatically recite it like a T. Would that be something that would invalidate our recitation and or threaten our prayer? Right? So me personally, I don't know the word sarata to be a word. And if it's not a word, it's an error, but it can't change the meaning to something else because it's not a word. Right? So it will be considered a lesser error in Allah's best.
Just the FYI, the lighting is better back there.
You think so?
I just checked.
Really?
And the nude on your face is off now. So.
No. The reflection off of your nur is off. That's what that is.
See, from here, you look better with the light here.
Here.
For me, I'm looking at you. But from the camera, actually, the light.
So
I should turn it off. I don't know. Does it make a difference?
I think it makes a difference.
It makes a difference.
It does. It doesn't make a difference. It's getting I think the real issue is, I think we're at the point where we need more than one light. I think that's the real issue.
Yeah, I think this is good when it's back there.
So there's I don't know how it's a physics question, really. I don't know how the human body absorbs light, but I believe the human body must absorb light because, to your point, if we place this light back here, right, it can look fine. In Jumu'ah, it gets dark. So the same distance, same camera, right, same space, like this, it'll be okay. Jum'ah, the video show up darker. So I've been testing with different angles for Jum'ah, right? And to me, it seems like the lighting is better up here for everyone who gives the khutbah except me.
You need to have a ring light in front of you all the time.
But at the same time, for everyone else, I'm adjusting the light for everybody else. Nobody's adjusting the light for me. So I can make sure everybody else is, looking spectacular. So Allah musta'an. It's time. You ready? Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Sallallahu wa sallam ala Nabina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'een. Imma ba'd. We have now entered into the space where the author is offering a tafsir and exegesis of al-Fatihah due to the importance of the chapter. The first thing that we will mention that is not mentioned here is why al-Fatihah is called al-Fatihah. Al-Fatihah, it means the opening. This chapter of the Quran is called the opening for two reasons. Because our Lord has opened his book with it. It's the first chapter in the book. And relative to this discussion, also because we open our prayer with it, right? It is what we begin our prayer with in recitation. So these are the two reasons as to why al-Fatiha is called al-Fatiha. The author states, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. In the name of Allah, the All-Merciful, the Bestower of Mercy. Baraka wasti'ana. The Basmala is utilized here in order to seek blessing and seek the aid of Allah. This letter ba, that's in the beginning of Bismillah, the harful jar ba, the preposition ba, in this case, in the Basmala has a name. It is ba'ul baraka or ba'ul isti'ana, the ba of seeking blessing or the ba of seeking aid. The author then states, Alhamdulillah, all praise belongs to Allah. And he says, Alhamd is thana. Praise here is praise. And the aleph and the lam in the word alhamd, the praise, the definite article, the or el, is placed here in front of the word hamd, in front of the word praise, listighraqi jami' al-madhamid, in order to include all praise in entirety. As for, the author states, as for the one who is beautiful, who has no hand in that beauty or what is similar to it, then this is called thana, or this type of praise is called a madh, and it is not called hamd. We have three words here. We have thana, madh, and hamd. They all mean praise. Okay, they all mean praise. We're going to set thana aside for a moment here. And what the author is stating is that if you bear a quality that is a praiseworthy quality, but is something that you have no control over, Allah has created you and he's made you beautiful. Allah has created you and he's made you tall. Allah has created you and he's made you fast, right? You don't have much hand in that. These are just natural qualities that people possess. That's called madh. That's called madh. But if it is a quality that one excels in, then that can be learned, or it can be grown, right? It can be bettered. Then this will be called hamd. But relative to this discussion now, just because we are stating it, hamd is wasful mahmud al-kamal fi sifati mahabbatin wa ta'zima. Praise, it is to describe the one who is being praised with perfection in his qualities that causes one to love and extol him. The understanding there is that Allah is so perfect in that, or so that the more that we understand how perfect he is, by default, this makes us love and extol him because we understand how perfect he is. So the better our understanding of Allah's names and his qualities, the more we love and extol Allah because of that. That's praise. So whenever we are praising Allah, we are speaking to the perfection of his qualities, the perfection of his attributes. The author states, Rabb al-Alameen, the Lord of all that exists. The Rabb, he states, is Hu al-Ma'bud, al-Khaliq, al-Raziq, al-Malik, al-Mutasarrif, Murabbi, Jami' al-Khalq bin-Ni'am. The Rabb, the Lord, he is the one who is worshipped, the creator, the provider, the owner, the manager, the cultivator of the entire creation by way of his blessings. With another expression, we can say, ifradullah bi af'alihi, to single out Allah alone in his actions. This is Ar-Rabb, the Lord. Al-Alameen, Al-Alameen with a fatha over the lam, with the sound a over the lam, Alameen. Kullu ma siwallahi alam wa huwa Rabbul Jami'. The Alameen is the plural of the word alam. And the alam means everything that exists outside of Allah. Everything that exists other than Allah. Meaning there are only two things that exist in reality. There's a creator and there's a creation. The creation is the alam. It is everything. And the Rabb is the Lord over everything. Okay. Ar-Rahman, the all-merciful. This is the general mercy that all of the creation receives. Ar-Rahim, this is the mercy that is particular to the mu'mineen, to the believers. And the evidence for this is the statement of the Exalted, as he stated, وَكَانَ بِالْمُؤْمِنِينَ رَحِيمًا. And he is merciful to the mu'mineen, to the people of faith. The understanding here is Ar-Rahman and Ar-Rahim, they are two names of Allah. The principle is every name of Allah is indicative of a quality of Allah. In this case, Ar-Rahman and Ar-Rahim, these names are indicating the quality of Allah's rahmah, of his mercy. So if Ar-Rahman and Ar-Rahim are both indicating his mercy, the question then becomes, what is the difference between the mercy of Ar-Rahman and the mercy of Ar-Rahim? Well, the author is stating here, the mercy of Ar-Rahman, this is the mercy that all the creation of Allah receives. Right? This is the standard. But Ar-Rahim offers another level of mercy specifically to the mu'mineen, specifically to the people of faith. With another expression, we can cite this differently. And Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah, he expresses it this way. And he states that Ar-Rahman, the mercy of Ar-Rahman, this is the standard quality that exists with Allah. The origin with our Lord in his innate nature, if we can say that way, is that he is a Lord that is merciful. He is susceptible to being merciful before being angry and punishing. Okay? The origin with our Lord is that he is a merciful Lord. So the term for that is in his that, in his essence, or in his ontology, he is a Lord that is merciful. In his state of being, he is a merciful Lord in his origin. As for Ar-Rahim, as for the bestower of mercy, this is when our Lord chooses to enact that mercy by bestowing it upon whoever he wills to bestow it upon. So then Ar-Rahman is the quality that is with him in his state of existence. And Ar-Rahim is when he extends it and enacts that mercy by bestowing it upon others. The author continues and he says, Maliki Yawmiddin, the owner of the day of Deen, the day of recompense. And we can recite it as Malik or Malik. Maliki Yawmiddin or Maliki Yawmiddin. Both recitations are correct. Maliki Yawmiddin, the owner of the day of recompense. He states, the author, this is the day of recompense and the day of account. It is the day that everyone will be recompensed for his or her actions. If it was good, then he will receive good. And if it was evil, then he will receive that evil. وَالدَّلِيلُ قَوْلُهُ تَعَالَى, and the evidence for this is the statement of the Exalted, وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ مَا يَوْمُ الدِّينِ, and what will cause you to understand what the day of Deen is, what the day of recompense is. And the hadith on the Prophet ﷺ, in which he states, "Al-Kayyis من دان نفسه وعمل لما بعد الموت والعاجز من اتبع نفسه هواها وتمنى على الله الأماني." Okay. In the hadith where the Prophet ﷺ has stated, the intelligent individual is the one who takes his own self to account and he prepares for what is after death. And the ajiz, the one who is feeble, the one who is weak, the one who makes himself or herself incapable, is the one who allows the nafs, allows the self to follow its desires, and then still wishes from Allah to be granted what they desire. All right. Scholarship differs on the historicity of this particular hadith. Nevertheless, the meaning of it is sound. Just for giggles, you all should have in front of you the translation of my brother and my friend Abu Maryam. How did he translate the word kayyis?
Which word?
Kayyis should be the first word in the hadith. Shrewd. You went for shrewd, huh? Okay.
I was reading it before you started, and then you said intelligent. I was like,
he went for shrewd. Okay, mashallah. May Allah reserve Abu Maryam. The term deen here does not mean religion. The term deen here means jaza, means recompense. So when we say Yom ad-Din, we don't mean the day of religion. We mean the day that Allah we will be taken to recompense for our actions. We will be compensated for our deeds on this day. This is the meaning of deen here. The author continues, إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ. You alone do we worship. لَا نَعْبُدُ غَيْرَكَ. So the meaning of you alone do we worship, or إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ, is that we do not worship other than you. We do not worship other than you, meaning we only worship you, meaning we will only worship Allah. He states, عَهْدٌ بَيْنَ الْعَبْدِ وَبَيْنَ رَبِّهِ إِن لَا يَعْبُدَ إِلَّا إِيَّاهُ. This is a contractual agreement between the servant and the servant's Lord, that the servant will only ever worship him alone. This is what that is when we're reciting this. وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينُ. And in you alone do we seek aid. This is a contractual agreement between the servant and the Lord of the servant, that the servant will not seek aid in anyone other than Allah. Isti'ana here, seeking aid, means seeking aid as an act of worship, meaning seeking aid from Allah in those things that only Allah has the ability to do. As for seeking aid from the creation in those areas that the creation has the ability to do those things, this doesn't enter into the realm of worship as isti'ana, as seeking aid. And this can be allowable to do with the creation if the creation has the ability to do such. It can also be encouraged, for example, if we know that by way of seeking the aid of others, it will bring about other benefits like fellowship, brotherhood, unity, and such, right? Sisterhood. Then it can become even encouraged to do. An individual, though, can opt out of this, can opt out of the allowable sphere of seeking aid if the individual wants to totally rely upon Allah in all of his or her affairs, right? You can opt out of that. Not because it's not allowable, because you are practicing a higher level of tawheed, a high level of monotheism, a high level of piety. And this is what can be understood when the Messenger of Allah ﷺ mentions, إِذَا سَأَلْتَ فَاسْأَلِ اللَّهِ وَإِذَا اسْتَعِنْتَ فَاسْتَعِنْ بِاللَّهِ. If you ask of Allah. If you seek aid in Allah. Right? That's from a high level of piety to do that. Okay. The author continues, اهدنا الصراط المستقيم. Guide us to the straight path. Ihdina, the meaning of ihdina, first we have to highlight that our Lord is ordering us to ask for guidance for us, not guidance for me. Meaning we're meant to want guidance for all. The guidance is not limited to ourselves. We do not own Islam. Islam is for everyone. Whether we like them or we do not like them, everyone has the opportunity to please their Lord by way of or through the medium of Islam. The meaning of ihdina, of guide us, is to direct us and to grant us conviction. Guide us, direct us, grant us conviction in that guidance. Guidance can be either general or specific. The huda can be am or can be khas. General guidance, this is being directed to the path so that you know that the path exists and what that path is. This is being explained. This is explaining Islam to someone so you know what the path is. But then there is the specific guidance. Just because you have been directed to the path or you have directions to get there doesn't mean you will actually traverse upon that path. Actually traversing that path, this is the specific guidance. And this is between the servant and Allah only. The general guidance can occur between the creation. It's possible. Between human beings, the angels, and the jinn. That can occur, the general guidance. But specific guidance, actually traversing the path between the servant and Allah. The author states, وَالصِّرَاط, and the path, it is Islam. And it is said the messenger. And it said the Quran, وَكُلُّ حَقٍّ, and all of these are correct. That is because if you say Islam, this includes the messenger and the Quran. If you say the messenger, well, the messenger brought Islam in the Quran. If you say the Quran, then the Quran tells us to follow the messenger and the Quran explains Islam to us. So either one of the three that you say, it's as though you are saying the same thing. We can also add to that, and we can say that this path is beneficial knowledge and righteous actions together. Beneficial knowledge and righteous actions together. We can also say that this sirat is also the sirat that is over the fire of hell. That is as thin as a strand of hair, as sharp as a razor, it has hooks on it, and it is the only way to get to paradise, and we will traverse it or not, or fall off of it, premise upon our deeds. And we are asking Allah to guide us on that sirat, on that path, on that bridge. We can also offer that as a meaning for the sirat here. Al-Mustaqim, that which is straight, or the path of fidelity, it is alladhi la i'waja fihi. It is that which has no crookedness in it. This is the straight path. We have mentioned previous that this straight path, it is due to the love of Allah that we are placed upon this path. It is due to hope in Allah that we traverse forward on this path. It is due to fear of Allah that we do not veer off to the right or the left of this path. And these three, the heart is meant to be constantly balancing between these three states. And these three, they are the pillars of servitude. Sirat al-ladhina an'amta alayhim, the path of those who you have bestowed your grace upon them, meaning the path that has been blessed for them. And the evidence for this is the statement of the Exalted, وَمَن يُطِيعِ اللَّهَ وَرَسُولَهُ فَأُولَٰئِكَ مَعَ الَّذِينَ أَنْعَمَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِمْ مِنَ النَّبِيِّينَ وَالصِّدِّيقِينَ وَالشُّهَدَاءِ وَالصَّالِحِينَ وَحَسُنَ أُولَٰئِكَ رَفِيقًا. And whoever obeys Allah and the Messenger, then they will be with those that Allah bestowed His grace upon them, His ni'am upon them. This verse in Surah An-Nisa is explaining this verse in Surah Al-Fatihah. This is the Quran explaining the Quran. So who are those that have traversed this path correctly, that Allah has bestowed His grace upon them, and He has blessed them preceding us? Well, He states that whoever obeys Allah and His Messenger, He will be with those people that He bestowed His grace upon them. Okay? So this is the equation. Obey Allah and His Messenger, you'll be with those people. Now, who are those people? They are the prophets, the truthful, the martyrs, and the righteous. So then, if we know that these are the people that have traversed the straight path before us correctly, then we look to such people and we emulate them and we do the things that they did so that we can get what they got, right? This becomes the understanding here in al-Fatihah. And of course, this is indicating to us the prophets and their disciples generally, and specifically our prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and his disciples. May Allah be pleased with them, and us looking to their lives and how they traverse the straight path correctly preceding us, and then we can utilize their life examples as examples in our lives in order to act appropriately in the different scenarios that we find ourselves in within life. The author continues and states, غَيْرِ الْمَغْضُوبِ عَلَيْهِمْ, not the path of those who have earned your anger, and they are those of Jewish faith, but not a person of Jewish faith just because a person happens to be of Jewish faith, meaning a characteristic that some people of Jewish faith may have, and that is they may have knowledge and then not act in accordance with it. So it's not limited to them. It's not a person of Jewish faith because of a person of Jewish faith. Anyone who has knowledge and does not act in accordance with the knowledge that they possess can fall into this part of the verse in earning Allah's anger. This is the path to earning Allah's anger, knowing what's right and then not doing what is right. And the author states, we ask Allah to grant us abstinence from their methodology. وَالضَّالِينَ, and not the path of those who have gone astray, those who are misguided. He states that وَهُمُ النَّصَارَى, they are those of Christian faith. And again, not a Christian just because a person is a Christian, but because of a commonplace quality that is not necessarily uncommon amongst them. And that is, they worship Allah premise upon ignorance and misguidance. We're not saying all of them, but it is quite common, and this is, I believe this is still a Christian dominant country, and many of us are very familiar with the faith and people of the faith here in this country. It is not an uncommon quality amongst them that they will worship Allah. No denial there, right? They worship, right? They're doing it right now, in fact, right? Okay. But they're not necessarily looking to Allah and his messenger to see what Allah has deemed to be worship and then worshiping Allah in a way that he has been pleased with. What is commonplace amongst them is that they will make up their own ways of worshiping Allah, offer that, and then expect Allah to accept it from them, right? And they'll just, for example, and not to speak about them in a deplorable way, but just to give a very brief example, in this modern era, it is very common for them to create what they're called ministries, okay? And whatever ministry they create is now their form of worshiping Allah. So they'll come up with something and they'll call it dance ministry, right? And then they'll make up dances, elegant dances often, but then these dances now are worshiping Allah. Why? Because they said so, right? Not because Allah and his messenger said so, right? For example, or whatever other things that they create. On the very extravagant side of things, you may see an individual, this is not the most common, dance ministry is pretty common, but on the far side of things, you'll see a person and the person will be up front by the pulpit and literally be in chains, right? Strapped down to some board, right? And then he's breaking off these chains off of himself, and then the congregation is cheering him on and all this, right? Where this somehow represents him breaking spiritual bondage and coming into his relationship with his Lord, and they made that up, right? There's no verse in the Bible, outside of the Bible, that says to do that as an act of worship, for example, right? So then the commonplace example here amongst them is that they worship Allah, but they may do so premise upon ignorance. And we're not saying them because of them, but anyone who utilizes this as a methodology of worshiping Allah, this is how we become misguided, right? Okay. Yes. We do find similar amongst those who are on the far extravagant end of those who ascribe to tasawwuf, if we're being fair, right? If we're being fair. But interestingly enough, this is non-conclusive, But we do have those among scholarship who attempt to seek out the origin of tasawwuf. And when we say tasawwuf, we're not saying tazkiyah, or we're not playing semantics here, right? We're not talking about that. We're talking about some of the practices that are on the more extravagant end, okay? If we're going to say tasawwuf and tazkiyah, we're saying the same thing using different words. We're not talking about that. Okay. But we have those in the scholarship that attempt to seek out the origin of tasawwuf. They end up concluding it's not a definitive conclusion, but they end up concluding based on indicators that the origin of what we call tasawwuf on the extravagant end is actually coming from the Catholic Church and Buddhism. And it makes sense. There are so many similarities, and you look at the time period, and you look at how Islam was expanding out to different lands and crossing over into Christian lands and lands where Buddhism was practiced, and it would make sense that the Muslims would have adopted some of that, right? But Allah knows best, right? Allah knows best. And again, we're saying that being fair for those that are more on the more extravagant end, not those that are on the more moderate end. Those that are on the more moderate end of tasawwuf, the difference, if we're being academically honest and academically fair, the difference is between us and them for the most part ends up becoming virtuous, right? We're going to say tazkiyah, they're going to say tasawwuf, they're going to say ihsan, we're going to say something. You know, it's words, but in practice, it's the same thing. With today, more than anything, again, not speaking on the extravagant end, the more balanced side of tasawwuf, they as well have issue with the more extravagant end of those who ascribe to Sufiya. Our challenge with them isn't necessarily going to be with tasawwuf itself. It's actually going to be in the realm of aqidah, because many of those who ascribe to tasawwuf, they will also ascribe to the Ash'ari creed or the Maturidi creed, right? And we kind of just mix all that together, right? And we should know what we are approaching when we are actually entering into discourse or debating certain issues. The majority of the time, we're going to be debating the Ethidi creed versus the Ash'ari creed versus the Maturidi creed, not necessarily just because the person ascribes to tasawwuf, right? We should understand that tasawwuf itself is a spectrum. It's not all just one thing. And most of what we hear about as Sufiya and that which we will be disenchanted with is that which is on the far extreme end. That far extreme end is not representative of the entire of the spectrum, right? Just saying that so that it can be academically accurate, right, in what we're actually approaching. Okay. The author states, we ask Allah that He distances us from their methodology. And the evidence of those who are misguided is the statement of the Exalted, as is coming in the chapter of Kaf, to the end of the chapter, verses 103 and 104. قُلْ هَلْ نُنَبِّئُكُمْ بِالْأَخْسَرِينَ أَعْمَالًا الَّذِينَ ضَلَّ سَعْيُهُمْ فِي الْحَيَاةِ الدُّنْيَا وَهُمْ يَحْسَبُونَ إِنَّهُمْ يُحْسِنُونَ صُنْعًا. Say to them, have you not seen, or shall we make you aware, shall we inform you of those who will suffer the most loss in their actions? And you have these, you worship their resurrection, you're going to lose them. They are those who are misguided in their methodology in the life of this world, in their method in the life of this world, their method of worship, all the while they consider themselves to be performing the best of actions. That is pretty descriptive. You can place whoever fits that inside of that slot. In the hadith, on him, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, لَتَتَّبِعُنَّ سَنَنَ مِنْ قَبْلَكُمْ حَذْوَ الْقُذَّةِ بِالْقُذَّةِ حَتَّى لَوْ دَخَلُوا جُحْرِ دُبٍّ لَدَخَلْتُمُوهُ قَالُوا يَا رَسُولُ اللَّهِ يَهُودُ وَنَصَارَى قَالَ فَهُمْ أَخْرَجَاهُ. We have a hadith, comes in Bukhari and Muslim, in which the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam stated, you all will follow the methods, you all will follow the practices the traditions of those who came before you, footstep by footstep, to the extent that if they were to enter themselves into a lizard's hole, you all would enter into it as well. They said, Sahaba, companions, O Messenger of Allah, are you speaking about the Jews and the Christians? He said, for men, not for whom. He said, for men. Who else? I mean, who else could I be talking about? Hadith comes to Bukhari himself. Okay. That's pretty straightforward. I don't think we need much explanation for that. We understand that. Okay. The second hadith. افترقت اليهود على 71 فرقة وافترقت النصارى على 73 فرقة وستفترق هذه الأمة على 73 فرقة كلها في النار إلا واحدة قلنا من هي يا رسول الله قال من كان على مثل ما أنا عليه وأصحابي. In the second hadith, now these two hadith, the author is bringing them in order to further explain غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين, those who earn Allah's anger and those who are misguided. This hadith, he states, those of Jewish faith divided into 71 factions. Those of Christian faith divided into 72 factions. And this nation, typographical error there. Yeah, this text is wrong. It should say 2. Interesting. It should say ithnatan wa sab'ina firqa. Okay. So those of Jewish faith have divided into 71 factions. Those of Christian faith وافترقت النصارى على اثنين or ثنتين اثنتين وسبعين فرقة, 72 factions, and this ummah will divide into 73 factions. All of them will be in the fire of hell except for one. We said, which one is a messenger of Allah? He said, whoever is what I and my companions are upon today. This one does require explanation. Okay, here we go. The first point here, and the point that the author is making, is that just as those of the Judeo-Christian faiths have divided themselves into factions and denominations, the Muslims will do the same, right? This is the point that the author is making by citing this particular hadith, meaning that there will be people from our faith that will emulate the, if not the beliefs, the practices, the mode of worship, the characteristics of the Judeo-Christian faith, right? That's the point that the author is making. But the meaning here of 71, 72, 73, the meaning is the foundational denominations of heterodoxy, right? We're going to say deviance or misgiving, that will branch off into all the other groups, okay? So the understanding is, when we are speaking to deviance in Islam, all deviance in its root goes back to specific factions, right? It goes back to the first ones to break off from the orthodoxy of the faith. So that's what this means, 71, 72, 73. Meaning we can easily count out more than 71, 72, 73 denominations within these faiths. These are the original factions of heterodoxy, the original faction that broke off from orthodoxy and orthopraxy. Okay, that's what this means here. Now, this opens up a topic of discussion in Aqidah, in theology, called al-milal wal-nihil, called sects and denominations, in which scholarship will look to seek out who now are these original factions of deviancy that all the other ones will be branching off of, okay? And scholarship actually truncates this further down to about 5, right? Down to about 5. And then those 5 branch out and branch out. The understanding here is that if you have a firm grasp on what orthodoxy is. One, you know what's right, and then you get a grasp on these foundational deviant sects. You'll be able to identify any deviation after that point, because it has to be coming from these original deviant sects, right? From the names you'll find in that discussion, for example, the Rafida or the Shia, right? You're going to find the Jahmiya in that discussion. You're going to find the Qadariya, right? In that discussion. For example, you're going to find the Khawarij, right? In that discussion. You might find the Murji'ah, right? In that discussion. And this is why when teachers are teaching and they mention certain Aqidah points, they may bring up these groups often or explain their beliefs because they are the foundational ones. If you understand the foundation, you can identify any other deviance after that point in time, right? As veering off of orthodoxy. Okay. Also, we have to point here that when we speak to the Muslims in this particular hadith, or before that, or including that, but when we look at this particular hadith, the Prophet ﷺ states, وَسَتَفْتَرِقُ هَذِهِ الْأُمَّةِ. This ummah will divide into 73 sects. The ummah is divided into two types. You have ummatul da'wah and ummatul ijaba, or istijaba, if you like. You have the ummah of da'wah, you have the ummah that's being invited, you have the ummah that has responded to the invitation. Okay? The ummah that is being invited is the non-Muslims. The ummah that has responded to the invitation, these are the Muslims. Here, this is speaking to ummatul istijaba, those who are seeking to respond to the invitation, right? That's us, that's the Muslims. This is not speaking to non-Muslims. It's speaking to the Muslims, okay? That's one. Two, this hadith is not saying that these denominations of heterodoxy are kuffar. That's not what's being said here. Not saying that they're non-Muslims. That's not necessarily what's being said here, right? Because they're ummatul istijaba. They're the ones that have answered the call. They're Muslims, okay? Also, what we have to say is, whose right is it ultimately to declare who's in paradise and who's in hell? Allah, not us. I'm coming. Who has knowledge ultimately of who will go to paradise and who will go to hell? Allah, not us, right? So ultimately, this is under the will of Allah. Yes, we are understanding that such an act can make a person deserving of punishment or deserving of being entered into the fire of hell, but what will actually occur with the individual, that's up to Allah. That's not our realm. Next, we have to say that of all of these denominations that were here, or that are mentioned here, or being indicated here, what was the question of the Sahaba? Did they want to know about all the ones going to hell, or did they want to know about the one going to paradise? They wanted to know about the one going to paradise, right? Could they have asked about that? Yes, some of them did. Like Hudayfa ibn Yaman. The people used to ask the Messenger of Allah about the good, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but I used to ask him about the evil out of fear of falling into it, right? Makhafata an yudrikni, out of fear that I would fall into it. He represents the minority amongst the Sahaba, not the majority, right? And yes, we should know that which is evil so that we know what it is and we can protect ourselves from it and not fall into it. The majority of the Sahaba, though, they were focused on, okay, what is right and how do I get to paradise, right? So they're asking about who is the saved denomination here, not all the ones that are going to hell. So then our balance is the same. We are aware of heterodoxy. We are aware of deviancy. We are aware of bid'ah. We're aware of innovation. But the majority of our focus isn't there. The majority of our focus is on doing what is right, pleasing Allah, and getting to paradise. That becomes now the balance. Is that?
The five you mentioned, did you say they are Muslim? Or did you say they're not? Because that's what I was a little confused when you made a comment.
Okay, good. So now we have to add some color, right? So there's discussion amongst.
misguided, they're going to hell, but we still classify them as Muslims, or?
Yes. Short answer is yes. But now some of these same groups now, scholarship differs on them, right? Scholarship differs on their Islam, like the Shia, like the Jahmiyyah, even the Khawarij. There are those among scholarship who deem the Khawarij to be kufar. Minority view, but it's a whole debate. So even who are these 5 original groups, they debate on that as well, right? They debate on that as well. Okay. Does that answer the question? No.
Yeah, no, it answers questions. It's just like each group is a whole different ball.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it answers questions.
Okay. But the focus of the hadith, though, is on the Muslims. Is on the Muslims who
So they are Muslims.
move away from orthodoxy.
There's a Muslims that move away from orthodoxy, and they're going to go to Jahannam.
They're under threat of punishment from Allah of going.
Of going into one. Okay.
We don't know if they actually go. Allah may forgive them.
Right, of course.
Right? Because the origin, when you look at how bid'ah is constructed and how it functions, right? We're coming close to a close. If we look at how bid'ah is constructed, yes, it is an innovation into the faith. It is that which is not of the faith that people are either adding to or taking from the faith, right? In actuality, when you have to add or take something away from Islam, you're claiming that Islam is imperfect. You're claiming that it's deficient, right? When our Lord says, to say, I perfected your religion for you all. But no, this person says, no, you left something out. We need to add something. Or you put in too much. We need to take something out, right? That's what that is, right? But now, depending on the individual, the majority of the time, people who fall into innovation are actually sincere. They actually have ikhlas. They're sincere for Allah's sake in what they're doing. Sincerity isn't the issue. The issue is mutaba'ah. The issue is in their emulation of the sunnah of the Messenger of Allah, right? They're not doing it the way that he did it or within the parameters that he set. That's the issue. So is it possible that due to their sincerity that Allah may overlook their shortcomings and forgive them? Possible, right? But is the threat of punishment there? Absolutely. Yes.
If they say it's not in Islam, but they say this is how our teachers did it, they follow that methodology, will that be considered bid'ah?
Not necessarily. We would need to look at that, because if we're looking at law, go ahead.
It's in Ibadah. So if I say that the Prophet ﷺ never said to do it this way, but my teachers, this is where the law, like the Sufi, because where I'm living in my community,
sure,
this is a big thing that bothers me
Mm-hmm.
and the environment that I'm in.
Mm-hmm.
So they say, like, for example, they do muraqabah,
Mm-hmm.
right? So at the end, some of them, what they'll do is they'll just sit down, close their eyes, and make zikr.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say Allah, Allah, make your heart say Allah, Allah.
Mm-hmm.
But they never said that this is what the Prophet did.
Mm-hmm.
They said the Prophet did go to the cave and he made zikr.
Mm-hmm.
Right? This is our teachers, the methodology from our teachers is that this is how to do it.
Mm-hmm. So if we had to classify that, I was going to use a much lighter example, but we had to classify that. So bid'ahs are different types. Now we're at the end and we're beyond time to go into the detail, right? But there are different types of bid'ah. There are different types of innovation, different ways to classify. One such classification is called bid'ah idafiyya. The bid'ah idafiyya, you can say that is bid'ah by proxy, right? Meaning that this act actually has some origin in Islam, right? So the act has an origin, but the way that you're doing it is out of place, right? What you're describing looks like it will fall under that umbrella. But what I was going to say, because I have to say that now because you brought that example, what I was going to say was that when we look to evidences in Islam, sources of law, after you get past the primary four, Quran, Sunnah, Ijma', Qiyas, consensus, and analogy, there are other evidences as well, right? Lower tier than those four, but evidences nonetheless. One is called istihsan, right? One is called istihsan. And istihsan is when in the absence of other textual evidence concerning an academic issue, scholarship would determine based on what they believe to be the best thing to do in that situation, right? Others might simply refer to it as al-aql, as reason, right? As an evidence in law. So in the absence of those direct texts that exist to utilize on an issue, then scholarship will utilize their broader knowledge or overall insight to attempt to determine what is the best course of action, right? That's allowable situationally, right? That's allowable situationally, right? Is this that type of a situation? No, it's not, right? No, it's not. From our posture, we would say no, it's not, right? Although this has to be the reasoning that is being utilized to justify it Islamically, though. Has to be in the realm of istihsan, and Allah knows best. But this would be a misapplication. Well, we would say this is a misapplication of istihsan, although istihsan is a viable tool in source and law. We're out of time. That's what we got. And we're actually, believe it or not, we're actually very close to the end of the treatise. More than likely, we're going to be completing this work next week, inshallah ta'ala. Muhammad. That completes the tafsir of Surah al-Fatihah and the third pillar of the salah. Questions? I know you asked them already, I know. Yes, please.
It's from the same group.
Yes.
So why is the new one better?
So, okay. So, the wazn fa'lan, right? The pattern or the scale, fa'lan. It means that this is a sifa. It means that this is a quality, right? So it's indicating a quality. In this case, we have to be sensitive with our language, so understand it in context. But in inequality of Allah, a standard quality of Allah, right? That's what the pattern fa'lan does. It means that there's quality, right? Other words on this pattern of fa'lan, for example, kaslan, shab'an, mal'an, lazy, hungry, full, jo'an, hungry. It's a description of some type, right? Whereas the pattern fa'il, this is describing wuku' al-fi'l, the occurrence of an action that is occurring, right? So ar-Rahman means this is a quality of Allah, and ar-Rahim means that this is an action of Allah, right? Linguistically, right? Taking theology out of it, right? Does that help, or? Yes? Questions? Barakallahu fikum. And double barakallahu fikum for the dude wipes. Huh? Sir.
Well, you mentioned that Yahudi have 71 sects, Christians 72, Muslims 73. But it seems like in reality, 100.
But they all do. So the meaning is the original ones that all the other ones branch off from. Not that these are all ones that will ever exist.
To me, that the Christians have way more than the Muslims have. This hadith is saying that the Muslims will have more than one more than. But this is more general, I think.
Very exciting. Very exciting. That's also true. And we actually submitted this over here. But also the number 7 in the Arabic language is used similar to the way that we'll say there's 100 of them, there's 1,000 of them. We don't necessarily literally mean there's 1,000, right? I'll get back to you in a second. You don't literally mean a second, right? You just mean a short time one. So the number 70 in the Arabic language is utilized to show a large number, right? Not necessarily a specific number. So there are those on the scholars that offer this meaning as well. That's not this specific number, but the Prophet is just showing that there'll be a lot, right? And further, that Jews 71, Christians 72, Muslims 73, that the Muslims may end up with more than even that of the Jews and Christians. That's because of the context. A lot of this. Very good.
My mind is